I want to make this video to challenge the stereotypes about gender relations in the Middle East. I think this video needs to be made, because frankly there is a lot of ignorance about Islamic cultures, and a lot of false narratives repeated as fact. One blatant falsehood that gets repeated often is the claim that Islamic countries punish females for being rape victims. This is simply not true, as there are no legal punishments for being a rape victim under Islamic legal systems. There are punishments for adultery, punishments that can get applied to both sexes. Men and women both get stoned for adultery, yet as usual only the plight of women gets any attention from people. If a Muslim woman is caught cheating, having an affair with a man, to avoid punishment, she may accuse him of rape to try and avoid the legal punishment for adultery. If her defense is not believed and she is punished by the court, feminists will report her as a female rape victim being punished for merely being a rape victim. This is completely false. The woman is being punished for adultery. I am of course completely against legal punishments for adultery, but to claim these women are being punished for being rape victims is dishonest and misleading. In fact, rape is a capital offense in many Muslim countries. For example, 15% of executions in Iran are of men who have been convicted of rape. Also, females being convicted for adultery seems to be rare in most Middle Eastern countries. It seems to only be a practice in the most underdeveloped Islamic nations. I am sure there have been cases in Middle Eastern countries where genuine rape victims have been punished for adultery. No legal system is perfect, and mistakes will be made, and let's face it, underdeveloped countries tend to have harsher legal systems than more developed countries. People have been beheaded for committing sorcery in Saudi Arabia, for example. Also, it is men who mostly bear the brunt of these harsher legal systems. Left-wingers will hyperfixate on the plight of women in underdeveloped Islamic countries and ignore the plight of men. That is par for the course for the left. The right will complain about feminism ruining the West, and then claim the Middle East is where feminism is needed. Men have it really bad under Islamic countries. They have it far worse than women do. Let's look at a few examples of this.
They're called dancing boys, T-boys, or, by many who have had to turn a blind eye to them, Afghan sex slaves. A subculture of bachabazi, or boy play, is widely known in Afghanistan, but for U.S. service members there, the abuse of these children is infuriatingly hard to stop, especially when the abuse comes from American-backed Afghan commanders there.
I had a boy because every commander had one.
In a 2010 PBS documentary, a former Afghan commander of the Northern Alliance spoke openly, shamelessly, about this sick practice.
If I didn't have a boy, I couldn't compete with the others.
Today, the New York Times reports that the American military stands accused of ordering troops to purposely turn a blind eye to the abuse in order to maintain good relations with Afghan forces.
The reason that we weren't able to step in with these local rape cases was we didn't want to undermine the authority of the local government. We were trying to build up the local government. Us acting after the local government fails to can certainly undermine their credibility.
Retired U.S. Army Captain Dan Quinn tells CNN that he and Sergeant First Class Charles Martland were punished for confronting an admitted Afghan child rapist, a police commander.
The confrontation turned physical, and I picked him up, threw him onto the ground multiple times, and Charles did the same thing. We basically had to make sure that he fully understood that if he ever went near that boy or his mother again, there was going to be hell to pay.
Quinn says he and Martland were relieved of their duties shortly thereafter. Martland is being involuntarily separated now from the Army.
I think the fear is that if we were to intervene, we wouldn't have the kind of close working relationship that we need with Afghan military.
Terrorism expert Jessica Stern says this is far from an isolated incident. She's spoken to several service members who say they were disturbed by what they saw.
They must have felt that they couldn't respond in the way they would have liked to. It was clearly a very painful subject.
Congressman and veteran Duncan Hunter, a Republican from California, is trying to save Martlin's career, writing to Defense Secretary Ash Carter, quote, "Martlin stood up to a child rapist. I trust you will give this case the attention it demands." A Pentagon spokesman told CNN today, "We have never had a policy in place that directs any military member or any government personnel overseas to ignore human rights abuses. Any sexual abuse is completely unacceptable and reprehensible."
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم رب اشرح لی صدری و یسر لی امری واحلل عقدة من لسانی یفقهوا قولی. با سلام به امام زمان عجل الله تعالی فرجه الشریف و نائب برحقش این قلب تپنده مستضعفان جهان امام خمینی و شهدای راه حق و حقیقت و مجروحین و معلولین. من مهداد عزیزاللهی نظامی از اصفهان هستم که 14 سالمه و انگیزه که باعث شد به جبهه بیام واقعا اون برادرایی که قبلا جبهه بودن و میمدن و برای ما تعریف میکردن که جبهه چه خاصیت ها خوبی داره، که مثلا هر کی بره دیگه ساخته میشه از هر لحاظ و دیگه اون ناخالصی هاش و اون گناهاش دیگه در اونجا در جبهه معصیت دیگه نمیشه. من به جبهه اومدم تا شاید بتونم در راه خدا کمک کنم و گناهانمون پاک بشه.
شما که چند وقت تو جبهه هستی؟
الان در حدود 8-9 ماه که در جبهه بودیم که 3 ماهشو در کردستان بودیم.
در کردستان چه کار میکردیم؟
در کردستان جنبه تبلیغاتی بود که ما کار میکردیم.
الان که تو گروه تخریب هستی بگو چه کارایی کردی تو این مدت 8 ماه؟
تو این مدت البته ما هیچ کاری نکردیم. هر کاری که میشد اون کار خدا میکرد. ما فقط وسیله بودیم و همین حالا که ما داشتیم با موتور از خط می اومدیم یه خونپار تقریبا 5 متری ما خورد، قشنگ 5 متری که موجش ما رو تکون داد، ولی ما هیچ یک ترکش هم نخوردیم و ما فقط وسیله در این جبهه ها. خودمون هیچ کاری، ضعیفیم در مقابل این قدرت ها و اینا. فقط خداست که ما رو یاره میکنه.
بگید که اینها رو که عراق در محورهای مختلف میکاره تا به حال خونسا کردید و آیا مین کاشتید برای محور خودمون؟
خونسا بله کردیم یک مقدار. این در عملیات بیت المقدس بود که برای برادرم همون فتح خرمشهر مرحله اول و دوم و سوم بیت المقدس بود که ما معبر باز کردیم و عملیات رمضان بود که باز معبر باز کردیم تو تیک نجف اشرف بودیم که واقعا معجزات زیادی بر ما شد و همین عملیات که البته من معبرشو باز نکردم تو گردان بودم.
بگو که پدر مادرت وقتی می‌خواستی به جبهه راضی بودن، ازشون اجازه گرفتی یا نه؟
پدر مادر من اتفاقا اون زمینه که اومدن به جبهه رو خودشون برای من درست کردن و آقا واقعا از اونا تشکر میکنم که اجازه دادن که بیام جبهه و به بقیه پدر و مادر هم میگن که اینقدر احساساتی نباشن، وابسته نباشن که فرزندشون بیاد جبهه و واقعا این جبهه ها الان بیان جبهه ها بیان بگذارن فرزنداشون بیان خداشون بیان ساخته بشن در این جبهه ها. به نظر من هر کس حداقل باید 1 هفته رو بیاد و این جبهه ها رو حتی به صورت تماشا نگاه کنه.
تابان رفتی برای خودمون گذاری کنی؟
نه رفتیم از نظر امنیتی درست نیست کجا.
The problem is, too many right-wing men see Islam and traditionalism as ideal models to run society by. Traditional societies of the past may have allowed men to mate God, but so what? Everything else about them was strongly anti-male. In fact, societies of the past were more violent and abusive towards everyone, as child abuse was far more common back then, and violence against children was seen as acceptable, and even a good thing. Also, animal torture was seen as an acceptable pastime and hobby. Bear baiting and torturing cats were seen as normal healthy hobbies for young men to engage in. Men used to be drafted by armies, and even gang-pressed into navies. Gang-pressing was a legal form of state-sanctioned kidnapping to press men into military service. The point I am trying to make is this. While men face some serious problems in the modern world, due to feminism running rampant, things in the past for men were even worse. Only someone who is ignorant, or anti-male wants to go back to the past. The past wasn't some pro-male golden age. Islamic societies tend to be more violent than Western societies, simply because they are less economically developed. I believe a reduction in violence is strongly linked to economic development and wealth. Poorer people tend to abuse and neglect their children more than middle-class or rich people. Less economically developed societies will still have women playing the traditional dependent role, as this is the best option available for them. It is not even cultural values forcing women into these roles, but economic circumstances. Tradcons who are obsessed with women see this as a good thing. I honestly do not see the appeal in supporting and providing for a woman who would not return the favor to me if the situation was reversed. If I was forced into a provider role, I would honestly feel very resentful. Islamic societies treat young boys as disposable cannon fodder. Western societies were using young men as cannon fodder in the First World War only 100 years ago. There is no going back to older models of living. Technology has changed the game, and quite frankly, anyone who wants to go back is anti-male, and obsessed with women. These resource-hoarding men just want to pander to women, bribing them, while ignoring the plight of other men and boys. Boys being used in wars, boys being sex slaves, boys being neglected and left to perish, is a price worth paying to the average Tradcon. All the Tradcon cares about is his relationship with the woman of his dreams. Many Tradcon men fantasize about going back to a brutal male dominance hierarchy, full of wars that countless men will perish in. It is not a coincidence that many right-wing Tradcons talk about weak beta males needing to die off, and lunatics like Turd-Flinging Monkey endorsing male mass murder. Turd-Flinging Monkey even supports Islamic-style patriarchy being set up in the West. A society that allows high-status men to mate guard their women, is not a pro-male society. Women were not kept in their place in older societies, they were protected and provided for. Islam may get criticized for being misogynistic, but that is only because the average person is indifferent to the plight of the male sex. Islam is misandric. There are roles forced upon both sexes under Islam, and the roles forced onto men are far worse. Men are forced to provide for female relatives under Islam. If the roles were reversed and it was women being forced to provide for male relatives, that would be called slavery. Also, most Muslim countries are developing, and are copying Western trends. For example, things like majority of university attendees being female, high divorce rates, the state taking care of women over men, etc. I predict that females under Islam will be allowed to abandon their traditional gender roles, while men will be forced to keep their gender roles. No one will care about men being trapped in their roles, and will carry on hyper-focusing on the plight of women. Islam is not misogynistic, nor is it a model that offers men anything at all. Islam is just another form of gynocentrism.